Hello friends, today we are going to study price elasticity of demand with different examples. Let us start with definition. Price elasticity of demand is a measurement of the change in the consumption of a product in relation to a change in its price. Expressed mathematically, it is price elasticity of demand is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. For example, let us say that the price of a candy drops from rupees 10 to rupees 5 and the demand increases from 10 candies to 15 candies. Here, the percentage of change in demand is equal to the percentage of change in price. 50% divided by 50%, which is 1. Types of price elasticity of demand. There are 5 types of price elasticity of demand: perfectly inelastic, inelastic, perfectly elastic, elastic, and unitary. Perfectly inelastic demand, where elasticity of demand is equal to 0. Changes in the price do not affect the quantity demanded for the good. Raising prices will always cause total revenue to increase. Goods necessary to survival can be classified here. A rational person will be willing to pay anything for a good if the alternative is death. For example, a person in the desert, weak and dying of thirst, would easily give all the money in his wallet, no matter how much, for a bottle of water if he would otherwise die. His demand is not contingent on the price. Graphically, perfectly inelastic demand curve is represented as a vertical straight line parallel to y-axis. In figure, DD is the demand curve. Thus, it can be observed that even when there's a change in the price from OP1 to OP2, quantity demanded remains the same as OQ1. Inelastic demand. Elasticity of demand is more than -1 but less than 0. Inelastic demand is where the price elasticity of demand is less than 1, which means that customers are largely unreactive to changes in price. For example, there may be 100 customers who buy a Ferrari for $2 lakh. If Ferrari wants to increase its price to $250,000 and 99 customers buy it, then the product is very inelastic. This is because customers do not care too much about the price. The demand curve of relatively inelastic demand is rapidly sloping, which is shown in the figure. In figure, DD is the demand curve that slopes steeply with a fall in price. When price falls from OP to OP1, the demand rises from OQ to OQ1. However, the rise in demand QQ1 is less than the fall in price PP1. Unitary demand, where elasticity of demand is equal to -1. Unitary demand is a theory that as price increases by X%, demand falls by an equal X%. The percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to that in price, so a change in price will not affect total revenue. A television manufacturer sells 100 televisions for $50,000. That works out at $500 per unit. It decides to raise its price by 10% to $550. At the same time, demand falls by an equal 10%, meaning it only sells 90 televisions. The demand curve for unitary elastic demand is a rectangular hyperbola, which is shown in the figure. In figure, DD is the unitary elastic demand curve sloping uniformly from left to the right. Here, the demand falls from OQ to OQ2 when the price rises from OP to OP2. On the contrary, when price falls from OP to OP1, demand rises from OQ to OQ1. Elastic demand, where elasticity of demand is more than -infinity but less than -1. When a product or service has elastic demand, it means that customers are very responsive to price. For example, if the local pretzel store starts charging an extra 5 cents and it loses half its customers, we can conclude that demand is very elastic. Consumers are unwilling to spend more and therefore go elsewhere instead. Examples of elastic demand: soup, bread, newspaper, chocolate, airline tickets. The demand curve of relatively elastic demand is gradually sloping, which is shown in figure. In figure, DD is the demand curve that slopes gradually down with a fall in price. When price falls from OP to OP1, demand rises from OQ to OQ1. However, the rise in demand QQ1 is greater than the fall in price PP1. Perfectly elastic demand, where elasticity of demand is minus infinity. Any increase in the price, no matter how small, will cause the quantity demanded for the good to drop to zero. Hence, when the price is raised, the total revenue falls to zero. This situation is typical for goods that have their value defined by law, such as fiat currency. For example, if a $5 bill were sold for anything more than $5, nobody would buy it. So demand is zero, assuming that the bill does not have a misprint or something else which would cause it to have its own inherent value. In perfectly elastic demand, the demand curve is represented as a horizontal straight line in parallel to x-axis. In figure, DD is the demand curve. Thus, demand rises from OQ to OQ1 and so on if the price remains at OD. A slight fall in price will increase the demand to OX, whereas a slight rise in price will bring demand to zero. So friends, these are the total types covered in my video. Thanks for watching my video.